booth along to the good friend Shirley MacLaine.
You remember when Allstate showed that 1969 cars couldn't take even a 5-mile-an-hour bump? That's when we first offered the Allstate Insurance bumper discount. And remember when Allstate showed how a man could take a 5-mile-an-hour bump and an old car could take a 5-mile-an-hour bump, but the 71s couldn't? And we continued to offer the Allstate bumper discount. Well, things are looking up. In 1972, there's about $100 less damage on the average. But still, $234 is a lot of damage for a little bump at walking speed. So Allstate continues to make this offer. We'll cut collision insurance rates 20% for any car the manufacturer certifies through independent tests can take a 5-mile-per-hour barrier crash front and rear with no damage. Let's get bumpers that can take bumps. Let's make driving a good thing again.
The Minority Report, which would write an abortion plank into the Democratic platform, apparently is being defeated. Many states are still passing, but the vote looks like this. No is against the Minority Report, and that's 579 to 372. The delegations are splitting pretty well. The McGovern forces are not holding together on this one, and it is obviously a rather free and independent vote, although the McGovern whips have been working through the hall, trying to keep the McGovern forces together so that this will not be in the platform for the reasons that Shirley MacLaine explained to Dan Shore and to us just a moment ago. We can listen to a little of the vote, and I'll give you a recapitulation of how some of the states have gone in just a moment.
Votes no. 0.55 votes abstaining.
7.55.
7 what?
Yes,
Would you repeat that for me, Senator?
Yes. 2.75 votes yes.
Rather interesting to see how some of these states have gone, how the McGovern forces are split. California, which is a solid McGovern state, split nearly evenly. 131 voted for this plank, that is against the McGovern position, 114 against the Minority Report. South Carolina voted against the report. Ohio voted almost 3-1 against the report. Utah voted against it 11-8. Delaware voted against it 2-1. Rhode Island voted against it, but almost even. Texas voted fairly solidly against it, 115-15. West Virginia voted against it, 32-3. South Dakota. Oh, wait a minute! I've got the wrong channel here. I'm sorry. Scrub all of that. Cancel it, and let's start all over. If you'd like, we can start over at 7 o'clock tonight, and we'll hear the platform, or the keynote speech again. Oh, I was reading the $6,500 vote a little while ago. Let's go back. California has passed, and no vote yet on that. South Carolina voted 30-2, 30 against and 2 for the abortion plank. Ohio voted almost 3-1 against the abortion plank, 87-30. Canal Zone voted 2.5 for and 1/2 against it. Delaware split the votes almost evenly. Texas did vote, as I reported a moment ago, on the $6,500 vote. It's just about the same anyway. In fact, most of these are. I could have stood on that and not corrected myself, and it would have made much difference. Texas 122 against and 11 for the abortion plank. West Virginia 24 against and 2 for. South Dakota 15 against and 1 for. And Kansas 22 against and 8 for. Virginia was the first state in the list of voting so far that went for the abortion plank. That's a liberal delegation from Virginia, mostly McGovern. It went 30.5 for the abortion plank and 20 against. Nevada went 6 3/4 against the abortion plank and 3 3/4 for it. Iowa heavily against, 37-9. Alabama 2 to 1 against, 24 to 13. Hawaii, 11.5 against, 3 for it. Minnesota barely went for it, 31 for the abortion flank and 30 against. Idaho is 8.5 to 6.5 against. Montana against, 9 to 7. District of Columbia against, 9 3/4 to 4.5. Guam split 1.5 each.
North Carolina.
Madam Chairman, North
And
Carolina.
we can catch up on this now. We're just about bring it up to even. Wyoming went 2 to 1 against. Mississippi 16 to 7 for. Arizona 17 to 7 against. And here's North Carolina.
9 no, 1 abstention, 6 absent.
And North Carolina went primarily
The
for
North
the
Carolina
abortion
vote,
flank.
48 yes, 9 no, 1 abstention, and 6 absent. Massachusetts.
We'll pick up after that North Carolina vote on a new tabulation here in just a moment, bringing you up to date. But first, let's go down to Morton Dean. He's with Father Robert Drinan. He's the head of the Massachusetts delegation. Obviously, quite an interesting figure in this particular vote. Mort?
Walter, Father Drinan has just shouted into the microphone behind us, Massachusetts passes. There is some counting going on. No indication yet how Massachusetts will vote on the issue. But Father Drinan, you're a congressman, Catholic priest, chairman of the Massachusetts delegation. What are your own views about this abortion flank?
I think that this particular proposed addition to the Democratic National Platform is very ill-advised. First of all, it's not very clear at all. It says in matters relating to human reproduction that each person's right of privacy should be fully respected. Well, in connection with all types of birth control devices and information and counseling, clearly there should be no restrictions on that. The question of abortion, however, is not a federal national question at all. Consequently, I voted no on this proposition. I don't want the Democratic National Platform to be taking a position on something that is exclusively within the jurisdiction of the states. The Democratic National Platform should not tell the states how to build their roads or run their prisons or depollute their rivers. This is a state question, abortion, and it seems to me that it's totally irrelevant and immaterial and should not be in the Democratic or Republican platform.
Let me put it another way, Father. Do you think that the presidential candidates themselves should state unequivocally where they personally stand on the issue? And couldn't this, in effect, just be a representation of how George McGovern feels personally rather than politically?
Well, no, the platform is not supposed to do that. The platform is the Democratic National Platform, which represents the main views of the Democratic Party. And I don't think that the Democratic Party as such should put this down as a doctrine that is a directive or is binding upon the people who believe in the democratic principles. I voted no on this. I am personally, from my moral tradition, firmly opposed to abortion as immoral. What the criminal laws of the state should do is their problem. But I think that we get into an area where we really have no jurisdiction and that there's nothing in the Democratic National Platform that is relevant to this question.
Do you personally know where George McGovern stands on the issue of abortion?
Well, he has said more than once that it is not a national question on which a president has to act at all.
His own view. I know he said the state should handle it, but his own view. Do you think it's important that you know his view?
No, not particularly, because a president of the United States is never called on to deal with this matter. I be opposed to a federal abortion law or any law that would get into that area. I think that's one of the areas where the 50 states should have exclusive jurisdiction.
Well, the Republican candidate, or the obvious candidate, President Nixon, has made his feelings known on the matter. He's against abortions. Don't you think there's going to be increasing pressure on Senator McGovern to state his own personal views?
One mistake doesn't justify another. There may well be upon Senator or President McGovern, but that's up to him. But once again, the National Democratic Platform enunciates those basic political principles on which all of we as Democrats generally agree, and that Democrats have no real policy in this area at all. Consequently, I think it would be a mistake to put it into the national platform.
Well, as a politician, member of the House, do you think it would help or hurt Senator McGovern, your own personal view, if he did come out and make a personal expression of choice on the matter?
Well, to go back to my question, this is so vague, so amorphous, so really incomprehensible that I don't think that if he said this, that he would know or anybody would know what they meant.
I'm talking about a specific announcement from the senator. Would it hurt? I mean, quite likely heard in Massachusetts, but what about
No, I don't think that that's so. I think that if he says that it is my personal conviction that we should have some civil or criminal law in the area of abortion, people will respect his judgment. But I don't think that his judgment or the judgment of anybody is higher or better than the information that goes with it and the analysis. But to repeat, I don't think that this is a question on which presidents should be tested.
Walter, I guess there's no question where Congressman and Father Robert Drinan stands on the matter of abortion.
Thank you, Morton. Father Drinan. CBS News coverage of the Democratic National Convention will continue in a moment.
I did not know what to expect. Well, I was led blindfolded by people. I did not see anything.
You're watching Mercury's latest blindfold test of ride. A new test. Not our biggest Mercury, but our trim new personal-size Mercury Montego. Against our competitor's best-selling full-size car. Almost a foot longer than Montego.
It's surprisingly that a car is so much smaller than the other one, and yet it's much quieter, much smoother.
100 car owners compared Montego's ride to the larger, more expensive car.
The Montego was a terrific ride. Very steady ride.
Much smoother ride and a much quieter ride in the Montego.
Official results show the personal-size Montego's overall ride superior to our competitor's best-selling full-size car, almost 2 to 1.
I'm amazed because there's no comparison.
A very dramatic difference.
I think it was a very, very good fair test.
How can a personal-size Montego ride better than someone else's full-size car? Because it's a Mercury.
Better ideas make better cars.
At the sign of the cat.
And so the abortion plank seems to be losing at this time. As you can see there by the vote, 1,075 to 703, 1,509 votes needed. Let me give a quick rundown of some of the states here since we last gave you the rundown and how they're going. North Carolina voted heavily in favor of the abortion plank, 48 to 9. Nebraska heavily against, 20 to 3. Georgia almost split, 21 to 15.5 against the plank. North Dakota was a 2 to 1 vote against it. Maryland voted 29 and 3/6 to 17 and 9/6 against the plank. New Jersey voted for it, but barely, 57.5 to 41. That's interesting. That's a heavily Catholic state in New Jersey, but it voted in favor of the abortion plank. Vermont voted 8 to 3.5 against it. Michigan almost a 3 to 1 against, 87 to 37.5. Colorado 4 to 3 in favor of it, 20 to 15. Washington voted almost 3 to 1 against it, 34 to 12. Louisiana barely voted for it. Another heavily Catholic state voted for this abortion plank, 2019. Very interesting. Connecticut, also a heavily Catholic state, voted, however, against it almost 3 to 1, 30 to 11. Kentucky voted 35 to 8 against. Missouri against by a heavy margin, 53.5 to 3, and New Mexico against 11 to 3.
35.5 not voting.
Eli Siegel, a top McGovern aide, is with Bob Schieffer, and he feels that the vote is running closer than they had expected, although the vote right now is 1,263 against and 799 for the abortion plank. The McGovern people would like to have it defeated. Eli and Bob Schieffer, come in.
That's exactly right, Walter. A lot of the McGovern aides have been scurrying around this hall, and Eli, Mr. Siegel, just told me that this is going to be a very close vote, that this minority plank may indeed pass. And I suppose the question, Mr. Siegel, is how will George McGovern feel about that?
Well, the campaign, I don't think he's been brought very, very closely, and he hasn't taken any major position on this. Most of the members, many members of the staff thought this is one that the senator didn't particularly need in the platform, but it isn't the kind of thing quite like California or Chicago or the vote on the nomination itself. It's not that major a matter for us.
Well, do you think it is going to pass? Are you able to say?
I think it's too early to say. I think it'll probably be defeated, but by a small amount.
Well, suppose it does pass. Isn't that going to present a real problem for the senator? Isn't it going to be much easier for the Republicans to peg him as a radical candidate for this on the platform?
No, I don't think so. First of all, it says nothing about his own views. Of course, he's certainly not going to walk around disowning all parts of the platform, but I don't think this is so completely out of line that it would be very embarrassing at all.
Well, could he You mean he could run on the platform but not endorse this particular plank?
Well, no, I'm not suggesting that at all. I would not think that he would want to disown the platform, but I don't think he would view this as a very major issue in the fall campaign.
But I suppose the question is, how would the voters view it, and how would the Republicans view it? Couldn't they make it a major issue?
If the Republicans wanted to, they could try. I think that the voters would probably see that the real issues are the issues that Senator McGovern has been raising for the last year, issues of economic justice and ending of the war, and not matters like this. This is essentially a matter for the states, and I think that's been the senator's position for some time.
When you go to these issue-oriented delegates of yours, what do you say to them about this when you tell them to vote against this? And certainly it's going to make many of the women delegates in your camp unhappy if this doesn't
Well, we
pass.
kind of discourage them from voting favorably on it, but there certainly isn't any pressure applied. It isn't kind of a party line vote in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that's it, Walter. Eli Siegel, one of the top strategists for the McGovern camp, and he's admitting that this vote is going to be very, very close, much closer than they thought.
Well, that's interesting because the figures up on the board don't quite look like it at this moment, Bob, of course, but a lot of big states have passed by, of course. But the no vote so far is 1259 against 798 yes votes. The no vote is against the abortion plank, of course, and the no vote is the pro-McGovern position. We've got a few more states to recap for you. Rhode Island, also a heavy Catholic state, voted no, 12.5 to 9.5, but it was close, clearly there. Indiana voted no by a much larger margin, and interestingly enough, the Middle Western states, the Plain states, seem to be voting heavily no. Indiana voted 63 to 12 no. Tennessee voted yes, 28 to 20, and Pennsylvania voted no by about a 2-to-1 margin, almost exactly 2-to-1 margin, 92.5 to 46. The other side against abortion, we've heard some of the arguments for it here on the floor tonight. We heard Father Drinan against it being in the plank. Shirley McLean keeping track of the vote, and on the white phone, which is the phone to the podium. But on the side against abortion, Charles Osgoods with some members of the Kansas delegation. Charles?
Walter, there are several reasons why people in the Kansas delegation, as in all the delegations, feel the way they do on this particular subject. I have here two ladies, Mrs. Olita Nye, who is a delegate, and Miss Karen Smith, who is an alternate from Kansas. What is your feeling, Mrs. Nye, about the subject, and how did you vote?
Being a mother of two daughters, I agree with the lawyer from Missouri that gave the last address, that I believe that children has a right to be born.
And what was the reason for your no vote, Miss Smith?
Oh, I guess the strongest reason is I don't think it should be part of the presidential campaign. I think abortion is, at this point, I think it's a state issue. I don't think it should be part of the federal campaign plan.
Is there a split in this between your personal feelings and the way you have indicated you would vote based on what Senator McGovern would like?
I've split in a few different directions, and none of which were based on, what the McGovern forces. I believe their main position was freedom of our conscience, and it was within my own conscience that I had difficulties in deciding as to how to vote.
You are committed to McGovern, though, not, or at least you're...
I'm an uncommitted delegate, but I am now supporting Senator McGovern, yes.
And Mrs. Nye, you, I see, are for your favorite son, Governor Docking.
Yes, sir.
What is your feeling as far as second choice is concerned? And might you come around and vote for Senator McGovern?
No, sir. But I will vote tomorrow night.
Well, here are two ladies, Walter, both of whom are against abortion and voted no on this minority plank, and they're giving you the reasons why.
Thank you, Charles. The vote has gotten up to 1,260 no and 799 yes. There have been a few more passes, and here are a few more state votes, a couple of large ones. Texas voted against, very large margin, 114 to 7. Iowa, another Middle Western state, and they've gone almost solidly that way, 37 to 8 against. Alaska almost split its vote, 4 3/4 to 3 3/4 against, 4 3/4.
That wish to switch from aye to nay. our chairman will not grant us access to the microphone in Ohio. I therefore ask that the aye be reduced by 10. We've got 10 now, reduced from aye to nay. So I request a poll.
Some Ohio delegations claiming that some of the members of the Ohio delegation claiming they couldn't get to the microphone, that the chairman of the delegation wouldn't let them. Now the chairman of the delegation is asking for the floor. So we've got a little dust up here. Temper's getting short in the early hours of the morning, perhaps.
Madam Chairman,
Here's the chairman of the
because
delegation.
it appears that someone is trying to cast some votes for Ohio, not from this mic, and someone who is not chairman of the Ohio delegation, and I am not going to stand for it.
The chair directs the Ohio delegation be polled.
Madam Chairman, I didn't hear you.
The chair directs, just a second. The chair directs that the Ohio delegation be polled, member by member, and the chair will send a representative to the delegation.
Madam Chairman,
for that delegation.
Madam Chairman, a point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point.
Madam Chairman, if there's a request for a poll of the Ohio delegation, and if any member of the Ohio delegation wants it and would so indicate to me, I would ask for this mic, and I would ask that they be given that permission. But no one in the Ohio delegation has come to me as chairman and asked that. Now, if they would, I would not try to deny them that right, and I would ask it. So I would like the delegation to know that they don't have to go and grab some mic someplace else. The only thing they have to do is come and ask me, and I would ask it. Now, I would like to ask you, Madam Chairman, if the requests so far as Ohio is concerned have to come from the chairman. Now, if that's my request.
Morton Dean is right down there in the middle of that Ohio delegation. Morton, what's this all about?
Walter, I have yet to figure it out. I'm standing right next to the state chairman, Mr. King, here, and we're going to grab him
Madam Chairman, could I have an answer to my
soon as he
question?
finishes here.
But I have an answer to my question. Madam Chairman?
Dispute over the count,
I
Walter.
attempted to answer your question. The statement of the parliamentarian is that any member of a delegation can request or demand that that delegation be polled. And in this case, the chairman is also ordering that the poll be, the delegation be polled in
Walter,
view
can
of
you
the
hear me
fact
now?
that the delegation
Yes, Mort, I just listened to this ruling.
What's the problem now?
We want to get this.
What's the problem? Why are you trying to get the
The
microphone?
problem is we asked our chairman to allow us to switch some votes before the roll call was completed. He said his tellers were not present and I should go and find them. He refused to give me any other tellers and access to the microphone.
Now, what do you want to do? You people want to switch your votes or just vote?
We'll be satisfied to just switch them.
How did you vote originally on the question? We're not getting too many answers here, Walter. People behind the chairman are seeking to be recognized from the podium.
Let us settle.
objection to my order that the
let us
delegation be polled.
I don't have.
I would like to ask that you indicate to the delegation from Ohio that if they have some request they want to make, I give them my word and I give it to you, that whatever they ask me to ask for, I will ask you. And I would like to have you tell them to do their business through me because they elected me by acclamation and unanimously as their chairman.
This is Frank King. He's an AFL-CIO official in Ohio.
Thank you very much.
He's a
Now, since
Humphrey
someone
delegate.
apparently does want it, and I think everybody knows it now, even though they didn't tell me, I ask that the delegation from Ohio be polled. Thank you.
All right, pursuant to the request of the chairman of the delegation from Ohio will be polled. The representative will go to poll the delegation.
Well, at least since the 1956 convention, the poll of the delegations are carried on while the rest of the business of the convention goes forward, the rest of the roll call. Back before 56, the polling of the delegation had to be take place publicly. And boy, what a maneuver it was. When the delegates discovered television, they found that was the one way they could get on. And they'd call for a poll of the delegation at the slightest hint of a possibility of getting on television, and then each member would stand up, call out his name, and vote aye or nay. Well, that obviously delayed the proceedings considerably, so 456, it was 52 that all that happened. 56, they changed the rules and said that polling would take place off the floor or while the rest of the business went on.
Go to the Ohio delegation. Will direct the delegation to a caucus room so that they can be polled.
That's the way it's to be done, off the floor.
The state of Montana.
Madam Chairman, the state of Montana would like to announce a new vote. 3 votes yes, 8 1/2 votes no, 4 1/2 votes abstain.
That apparently was just a little dust up in Ohio and a kind of a misunderstanding, and they got it all cleared away. The vote now is 1,260 against the abortion plank and 795 for it. 1,296. The vote changed before our very eyes. Charles Osgood is with Bella Abzug, who's been lobbying very hard on this controversial issue. She's the congresswoman from New York City, you know. Charles?
Congresswoman Abzug, how is it going in the New York delegation?
Oh, it's going very well in New York. We have an overwhelming majority in favor of the minority plank. They reported 198. There seem to be some that have been some arithmetic or other changes taking place, scaring people into thinking that somehow or other it's not useful, but that we are holding essentially in New York.
What do you say to the argument that the passage of this plank will make it more difficult for Senator McGovern to be elected?
Well, I don't happen to share that view. See, this issue, first of all, nobody has really read this plank, apparently. If you read the language of the plank, it speaks about the right to human reproduction being a matter of individual conscience, as determined also by relevant Supreme Court decisions. Now, the courts have been generally moving in the direction of saying that all matters concerning family, marriage, and sex are rights of privacy to be protected under the Constitution, like the right of free speech. If there are those who are, as a matter of individual conscience or religion, object to it, then they have a right to. But they don't have a right to interfere with a person's exercise of an individual right any more than they have a right to interfere with a person's exercise of individual speech. The position of Mr. McGovern on abortion, whatever it is, has been debated in many primaries. Candidates support each other on it, and the Republican and the Democrats will fight each other on it, no matter what is in the platform. The addition of a position in the platform merely is recognizing that it's a human right, and it's a guide and a goal for a Democratic Party of change to commit itself to understanding that it's a human right to be respected in those terms. And I think that it has really been over-exaggerated as affecting what could happen in the political campaign.
How about what Shirley MacLaine had to say here earlier tonight?
Well, I don't agree with Shirley MacLaine because she said that essentially it did not belong in the political process and it would distort a presidential campaign. The way in which we create change or acceptance of law and the establishment of rights is by using our political process, whether it's a pressure process, whether it's a commitment of policy in a program or a platform. So we in a political convention could hardly accept that point of view. I disagree with her.
Well, if Senator McGovern feels uncomfortable with this, though, and considers it a burden or a handicap, aren't you putting something on his shoulders that he'd be better off without?
Without this plank, this was an issue in the campaign. The discomfort arises from the fact that there's a very small organized minority in the country that seeks to expand the implications of this request of people to have control over reproductive or sexual life. And it isn't this which makes it uncomfortable. What makes it uncomfortable is the campaign of a very small organized minority. All polls in this country have indicated that an overwhelming majority, or at least a majority of people across religious lines, including Catholic lines, favor abortion in the majority. So that obviously this is merely utilized in the political arena by opponents to try to make issues with the use of small groups.
Well, but aren't you afraid that the Republicans might do just that?
They will do it whether or not we have it in the plank. You see, this is the point we're all missing here. The fact that it's in the plank is a matter of a guidance and a commitment to what we are going to strive for in human rights. It has nothing to do with the political campaign. As a matter of fact, a candidate can take a position to the right or the left of it. And it may very well be that Mr. McGovern can say he has a position to the right of it. It may be that's what he is saying. So that it's possible.
Congresswoman Bella Abzug. Walter?
Charles,
yes,
would you like to ask Congresswoman Abzug about the little tiff with Shirley MacLaine earlier tonight about that South Carolina strategy yesterday? Do you know about that?
No, I missed
Maybe
that.
you missed it.
I missed that.
Well,
Walter.
they had a little shouting match out in front of the rostrum a little earlier tonight. Mrs. Abzug accused Ms. McLean of deserting the women in working for the McGovern strategy and cutting the South Carolina vote so they wouldn't be caught in a parliamentary maneuver and lose a test vote that might have damaged McGovern's chances. And she said that she went against the women in taking that position.
Walter, I hesitate to try to repeat that, and I wasn't familiar with the story. Shall I give this earphone to Congresswoman Abzug and let you tell her, ask her the question yourself?
Sure, good idea.
Okay. Mrs. Abzug? Mrs. Abzug, would you like to, can I put this to your ear so you can talk to Walter Cronkite directly? And he had a question he wanted to ask you. That's a little difficult to do with that.
I didn't mean to make it difficult, Mrs. Abzug, with the hat problem there, but I was asking about the little tiff I gather you had with Shirley MacLaine earlier this evening, in which you accused her of deserting the woman's position on that South Carolina vote last night.
No, I was just trying to point out that political pragmatism is a great luxury. We are, all of us, and both of us, very anxious to defeat President Nixon. We are both supporters of Senator McGovern. Some people have more political stomach than others. I believe that a commitment to the South Carolina challenge and underrepresentation was a very important thing. I realized that Mr. McGovern and the other candidates didn't want any determination of any issues prior to the California challenge that might be a precedent for the California challenge. I happen to disagree that that should have happened. Having perhaps a little greater sense of security about myself in the political arena and the judgments of chairs and so on, I felt that we would not prejudice the California challenge. There were a sufficient number of votes to sustain the South Carolina challenge, which had underrepresentation of women. It would not in any way change the composition as far as presidential preference was concerned or racial minorities. In fact, I think it would have increased it. It would not have replaced the men. It would merely have, in the remedy, provided that they would have shared the vote. And I saw no reason why those who were zealots for Mr. McGovern should have felt that somehow or other it was not possible to really stand fully behind this challenge as neither as the other candidates did either. And so I felt merely that I would explain this to Shirley, whom I'm very fond of and who is a great friend of mine and who has done a great deal for Mr. McGovern and for women. But there are things that one sometimes has to learn.
Ms. Abzug, does that maneuver last night on South Carolina and the McGovern position tonight now on this abortion flag, is that creating any disenchantment among women over the McGovern candidacy?
Well, I think these have been problems all along. I think that there's a certain tendency to be concerned politically with whether or not certain issues do affect the campaign. And I think people, to the best of their ability, vote their conscience. I think managers of people at conventions tend to get terribly jittery and tend to upset the vote, so that the vote doesn't really always reflect the real thing. It distorts the vote unnecessarily. And we do realize that Mr. McGovern doesn't act only by himself, but he has a lot of jittery managers and staff around him who really make these decisions, and we understand that, and so we just have to see that we get some different staff in the campaign that have a little more stomach.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Abzug. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Another outstanding spokesman for women's rights is Germaine Greer, of course. She's here at this convention as a journalist. Hal Walker is with her for some reaction on this issue. Hal?
Yes, Walter. Ms. Greer is rather reluctant to be interviewed at this time, especially while the vote is going on. Why are you so reluctant to hold this interview?
Because I'm trying to cover this convention for a paper. I'm being paid. I'm doing a job. I can't do it if I keep shooting my mouth off to everybody who puts a microphone under my nose.
Earlier you said you thought this was a very highly emotionally charged issue and that for that reason you didn't want to talk about it.
Oh, I didn't say that was the reason why I didn't want to talk about it. It's the reason why I don't want to talk carelessly about it this time.
Wouldn't you anticipate that an issue like abortion, I noticed that Shirley MacLaine kept saying, some of the other speakers kept saying, this is not an abortion issue, not an abortion issue, it's a freedom of choice issue. Isn't this purely an abortion issue that's being voted right now?
No, it's very clear it's not purely an abortion issue. It relates to all questions of control of one's own body. I think if you read it carefully, you'll see that it relates to things like voluntary sterilization, involuntary sterilization, and so on. It affects you, brother.
How so?
I thought I just made that obvious. Do you want me to explain how sterilizations are conducted?
Well, go ahead, Hal. It's early morning television.
It's a genocide issue. It works both ways.
Mr. What is it going to mean if this minority plank is, if the minority plank does go through? What is it going to mean?
That's what I don't know. I really don't know. I'm here to learn, not to teach anybody. I'm trying to understand things.
Isn't it simply an issue of women's rights?
No.
What are the other things involved, as you see them?
There is a right involved which women constantly invoke, which has never, ever been explained, or there's never been any theory about it. That is the right to control one's own body, which, as you know, is not actually mentioned or allowed by the Constitution. Now, if that right were to be recognized by a Constitution in any country, it would have to include soldiers under arms, it would have to include mental defectives, it would have to include patients in hospital, it would have to break the power of the entire medical establishment to keep people guessing. It would have to break the power of doctors to give you drugs that you don't know the name of, because that compromises your control of your own body. There are people all over this country eating pills every day and they don't know what they're for. Now that right is implicit in that particular report, which is very vague and very careful in its formulation. I don't think it would do McGovern 1 ounce of harm to espouse that platform. But that depends, of course, on how realistic you think his chances are of winning in November. And whether certain prices are not too high to pay for winning. American presidents traditionally move one way or the other, towards the center, depending where they were. And Richard Nixon moved from the right to the center. McGovern will probably move from the left to the center. But it remains to be seen whether this issue is or is not a centralist issue. See, one of the things that has happened here is that people have fooled themselves about the character of this vote, and they have not voted simply according to their consciences, which is what Shirley MacLaine pleaded with them to do. They have voted according to all kinds of considerations. There were the people who voted in order to discredit McGovern with a platform that he couldn't handle, the hypocrites. And there were also the people who didn't vote for the motion because they were afraid it would harm McGovern. So what do you do when people are horse trading in this way?
Do you sense in any way that McGovern is backing away from earlier commitments he seemed to have made to women's rights?
I'm not really very sure what commitments he did make. I mean, I don't regard McGovern as a revolutionary at all.
Hal.
Yes, Walter.
Hal, the vote just went over the top for the anti-amendment people. That is, the no vote, turning down the abortion plank, apparently is going to be the prevailing vote. That is, the abortion plank is being turned down. Let me put it the right way, probably.
The minority plank, the challenge plank,
the minority plank
turned down.
Has been turned down, apparently, unless votes are changed.
I hope by narrow margin.
What was the margin? We were unable to hear it since we were
1,518 now.
It doesn't matter whether you're talking or not in this convention hall. You can't hear a thing.
It's 1,518, Hal, against 1,038 for. 1,509, of course, was the majority vote.
Well, that's it.
Of course, there are more votes to be cast, apparently. I don't think they're all in yet, but unless their votes are changed or is challenged in some way, that's it. The abortion plank was turned down. New York cast a big block of votes yes, 187 yes to 76 no, but that wasn't enough to change the totals here. Florida voted no in a big way, 54 to 15, and Oregon voted no by a narrow margin, 18 to 15. Here are some other votes. that we have compiled since the last summary. Wisconsin voted barely for the abortion plank, 30 to 29. Illinois barely for it, 66.5 to 62.5. And Georgia voted against it, 3 to 2, 21 to 14, that is. And the abortion plank has been rejected.
The New York vote is now 186 yes, 75 no, and 17 abstentions.
It's going to be very interesting to see what they do with this session tonight. Obviously,
Massachusetts.
Madam Chairman,
a lot of very tired people in this hall. They still have
What's that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planks on the minority reports to be considered. The next one is that on
60?
homosexual rights, equal rights for homosexuals, no discrimination
The
in
Massachusetts
jobs,
vote
hiring,
is 50 yes, 36
and that
no,
there should
and
be
16
no laws
abstaining.
against freedom for consenting adults. This is a very quiet hall, it seems to me, at this hour. Mort Dean is with the convention chairman, Lawrence O'Brien, who, of course, himself has had a very long night, although he's not been on the platform tonight and has turned the gavel over to Mrs. Braithwaite, Mrs. Burke now, his vice chairman, the lady from Los Angeles. And the votes are being conducted by another lady, longtime secretary of the National Committee and secretary of the convention, Mrs. Dorothy Riedenberg Bush. O'Brien has had a tough night. Mort?
Yes, Walter. Chairman O'Brien being interviewed as he walks along the floor here, shaking hands, looking pretty much like a candidate himself, being interviewed at this moment, saying he's down here just to wake himself up as well as try to wake some of the delegates up, and we're going to move over to it right now.
And there certainly is a marvelous attitude here, just absolutely marvelous.
Well, it's going to be, what, 5 o'clock or later?
We're going to break last night's record.
But, I mean, it's going to be 5 o'clock or later before this very important issue of busing, a very delicate issue comes.
We have excellent attendance here on the floor, and we logged, I think, potentially 80 hours for business starting last night. Was it last night? Monday? Well, last night, yeah.
Harry, as an old political...
And we have to get this job done, but everyone has been cooperative. In fact, we've cut the overall time span.
But is it really possible to have rational thought about...
You bet. We're all more rational this hour of the morning.
Larry,
testing it out.
As an old political pro, white male
emphasis on the old.
But what is your view of the platform as you see it now in terms of taking on President Nixon in the fall?
Thanks very much, Mr. O'Brien. Excuse me.
Okay,
but,
Tom,
we've got to move
it's
on.
okay. We'll stay with it.
Well, it's developing into a solid platform. I think it speaks to the basic problems of America and speaks to these problems in a very candid, forthright manner. I see that it's going to be very, very helpful to the candidate and the party in the fall.
Don't you have a problem, feelings running very strong here, particularly concerning busing, concerning abortion? So not only is there a political split, you've got this ideological split, you've got a split concerning morality, as some people see these issues. How do you put both sides together?
Well, there are differing views here, and that's as it should be. And no one has hesitated to express their views in a vigorous manner, and that's as it should be. But, you know, before I came down here, I read a lot of horror stories, what was going to happen here at Miami Beach.
Before you came down on the floor to greet the delegates?
No, before I came to Miami Beach. And I find that this convention is truly an open convention with decisions being openly arrived at, and that was our objective, and I think it's the finest convention I've ever attended. I've had, I guess, 4 or 5 of them. So I'm very, very pleased.
Some of your people down here suggest that perhaps an open convention isn't the best way to win elections.
Well, let's test it. Maybe it's about time that this nation had a testing of a truly democratic process.
You know something, Larry, with your walk down here, with all the talk about vice presidential possibilities, I noticed you did a lot of handshaking. Any interest in an elective career? Is that one of your purposes of being down
I'm
here?
simply interested in getting a feel of this floor from down here and meeting some of these people. You have to remember, most of these people are new to me, strangers to me also.
Okay, Walter, I guess we can scratch O'Brien's name.
Say hello to Walter, if he's awake.
Walter's awake, and I think we can scratch the name O'Brien from the list as vice presidential possibilities.
We added bronchite just now.
Mort,
yes, Walter.
You're asking if he's interested in an elected office. Of course, there's hardly any more political office in the world, as you and I know, than chairman of the National Committee. It's not necessarily elected. We saw him almost gavelled to an acclamation vote tonight as permanent chairman of the convention, and in the past, national chairmen traditionally are named by the presidential candidate, the titular leader of the party, but it's pretty good idea for a national chairman of the party, if he's going to get along and keep the party together, to shake a lot of hands. He's a politician in his own right, of course, isn't he?
He sure is, Walter. And I think one point that Mr. O'Brien made is certainly well taken. The feeling down here on the floor, there are strong feelings, of course, on the issues, on the candidates, but still all of the expectations that were heard of trouble on the floor and new delegates who were uncontrollable and not used to coming together on the various issues. All of those warnings have proved silly at this point. Pretty good crowd, interested in the issues and the candidates, Walter, but no trouble on the floor.
It's really been quite remarkable, and quite a remarkable performance. The Ohio caucus is over. Barry Seraphin is with Frank King, the delegation chairman. Barry?
That's right, Walter. They only took a few minutes for that caucus. Mr. King, did you get things settled?
Well, the individual that wanted the poll of the delegation didn't want a poll of the delegation when we went into the room, so we didn't poll the delegation.
So no votes changed?
No, they didn't want to go through with it. So he withdrew his request for a poll of the delegation. So the result is exactly the same.
Well, it may be moot anyway. That plank has been defeated in those few minutes you were in there. Well, why did he withdraw his request?
Well, it's a bad situation. This is the second night now that Ohio's looked pretty foolish on this tube, and it's because of the same individual. We're unfortunate enough to have a leader of one of the presidential candidates group within our delegation who is really unstable. That's exactly what it amounts to.
Well, a leader of which candidates group?
I don't want to say that. Not mine.
Well, so you didn't get your problem solved at any rate.
Well,
I heard some harsh words out in the hallway a few minutes ago here.
Well, not by me.
No, not by you, but by a member of your delegation.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a pretty tough charge there, Barry, that a member of the delegation is unstable. Unstable politically or otherwise?
The question is, how do you mean unstable, politically or otherwise?
Well, I think people are going to have to draw their own conclusion. He wants something one minute, and the next minute he doesn't want it to.
But maybe Barry,
just votes.
Maybe Barry Frank King could tell us what was transpiring last night. Some people have drawn political implications in all that delay, that Ohio was delaying to throw its weight one way or another, to be a power broker in the old style. But now it's suggested that it was just confusion in the ranks.
Another question is concerning Ohio last night and its delays, whether or not it was part of a strategy or whether or not it was just confusion within the delegation.
No, this demonstrates again that this same individual was responsible last night, because we have different delegates for different candidates, so naturally they have to be polled, and we have been polling and watching each other cast the vote, and we've done it, and then we tallied them up. And this particular individual wouldn't agree that the tallies were right, and he insisted on counting them about 20 times before he would say that they were right, so I wouldn't announce them until he was agreed that they were right. It was because of his foolishness that the whole state of Ohio looks foolish to everybody in the country.
Well, but he and I don't know whether any others, but at least one member of your delegation was saying that he didn't have access to you, that he didn't have time to switch his votes, didn't have an opportunity to switch his votes, at least on this plank vote tonight.
Oh, they have opportunity to do anything they want. That's what caused the delay, because I wouldn't announce it until they were all perfectly satisfied that what I was about to announce was what they wanted.
Well, do you have control over your delegation, Mr. King?
Part of them, because 61 of them are McGovern delegates, and certainly I have no control over those.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was Barry Seraphin interviewing Frank King, the chairman of the Ohio delegation. On the floor, Bob Schieffer has a report regarding some maneuvering of the votes, apparently to embarrass the McGovern candidacy. Bob?
Walter, I want to tell you, these McGovern people were very, very worried that they were going to lose that vote just a while ago on the abortion plank. The reason they got worried was that they got indications that some members of the Humphrey and Wallace camps were going to vote for the abortion plank in an effort to make the platform appear more radical, in an effort to embarrass Senator McGovern. They were so concerned that Frank Mankiewicz, one of the top strategists for McGovern, came charging out of the trailer in the back, was all over the floor here, going from delegation to delegation, wouldn't even stop to talk with us, except to say that he feared that the Humphrey and Wallace people were ganging up on him. And just about the time that you announced that the vote had gone over the top, they knew for the first time that they were not going to lose this. Joe Duffy, I was talking to Joe Duffy just as you announced that, and he said, we think we've got it won now, but we were very, very worried for a while. I might add, one reason that Frank Mankiewicz may have been running around the floor, Betty Friedan, the woman's rights activist, was chasing him and shaking her finger part of the time, so perhaps that accounted for some of his speed.
The Ohio delegation.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
And now, Mrs. Burke's calling for the Ohio vote, and they're getting it from Frank King. You might note here, as you know, the abortion plank has lost, and Frank King's announcing the vote of the Ohio delegation.
And to this convention, but I would like to announce that the request for the poll of the delegation was withdrawn by the person who made it, and we didn't have to do it at all. We wasted your time again, and so I'd like to announce that the vote we cast, 30 votes yes, 87 votes no, 6 abstentions. Our apologies. Yay, Ohio!
So Ohio voted pretty solidly against the abortion plank, too. That's the winning side, as you know. O'Hara's ruling that a point of order will be overruled. Apparently they're expecting one for some reason.
All right. The vote is yes, 1,101.37, no, 1,572.80. The minority report is not agreed to.
It's very interesting there. The total no number is about 2,900 votes in the hall. That's a lot of votes still here at this hour of the morning. Almost no one's gone home. A couple hundred votes are missing is all.
In addition to the fact that you have settled this one, several of the other items which will be coming up have been partially resolved.
No,
we can complete this evening if we will continue to move forward and end up with a people's platform. Minority report.
Now, this is the minority report on homosexuality.
Subject matter is sexual orientation.
It's the gay lib plank.
Minority report number 8.
End all employment and other discrimination against homosexuals.
On sexual orientation to the right to be different section of rights, power, and social justice.
Joe Califano, the general counsel, said a little while ago that he bets there's a roll call on this one. There was a groan on the platform when he did.
Their own sensibility, emotionality, and lifestyle.
Richard Murphy, the convention manager, said a moment ago that he thought they might be ready for a motion to adjourn in about another hour.
Speaking for the minority report will be Madeline Davis of New York and James Foster of California.
For this minority report.
Also Lowell Williams of Minnesota.
For equal rights for homosexuals.
Mr. Chairman, assembled delegates, my name is Jim Foster. I am a delegate to the Democratic National Convention from the 5th Congressional District of California.
That's San Francisco. He's a 32-year-old community
I
organizer
am
there.
also the political chairman of the Society for Individual Rights, the nation's largest gay rights organization. As such, I am here tonight representing not only the 1,200 members of the Society, or the thousands of gay men and women who live in the 5th Congressional District, but the 20 millions of gay women and men who are looking for a political party that is responsive to their needs. Due in large part to the reform of the Democratic Party, I and other representatives of the gay liberation movement are able to participate in the process of choosing those who would represent us all. But the issues associated with gay liberation are not partisan issues. They are not Democratic issues or Republican issues. They are not conservative issues or radical issues. They are human issues. And as such, they deserve support from all people, regardless of their political philosophies. We, the representatives of the national gay community, are here to present you with a statement which concerns the rights of America's gay citizens. A statement which, if you affirm and include in the Democratic platform, will help to bring to an end the oppression that gay people have lived with for centuries. We do not come to you pleading for your understanding or begging for your tolerance. We come to you affirming our pride in our lifestyles, affirming the validity of our right to seek and to maintain meaningful emotional relationships, and affirming our right to participate in the life of this country on an equal basis with every other citizen. It is a basic assumption of many Americans that no citizen should have to fear repression from society because he or she does not share the opinion of the majority. There is no minority in America today who can testify to the falseness of that assumption better than the gay minority. Our artists and poets have depicted what life is like for all oppressed people, perhaps because we realize how an oppressive society attempts to control those who are different from the white, affluent, male, heterosexual power structure. There are many forms of oppression that gay people face in this country. Perhaps the worst forms of it are the real and imagined fears with which gay people live every day. These fears stem from the knowledge that for a person to love another of the same sex is at variance with society's expectations. Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, in their recently published book, Lesbian Woman, list the fears with which gay people contend every day. Fear of identification leads to fear of ridicule, fear of rejection, fear of group association, fear of the active gay community, fear of police, fear of family, fear of forming friendships, fear of loneliness, fear of losing one's job or career, fear of loss of respect, fear of displaying affection, and perhaps the most devastating fear of all, fear of self-acceptance. Most of these fears are well-founded, for as members of an out group, gay people are subject to reprisals from all quarters of society, friends, family, employers, police, government, and the church, which has made of homosexual behavior a special kind of sin, and of the homosexual a special kind of sinner. Let us look at these forms of reprisal a little more closely. In practically all parts of this country, gay people are subject to arbitrary and discriminatory law enforcement on the part of the police and their agents. The display of any kind of affection between gay people is cause for immediate arrest, humiliation, and punishment, no matter where it is observed. Non-gay friends of mine are amazed to discover that even the simple act of taking another's hand in a gay bar is frowned upon by the management, as it is cause for the loss of their license and their livelihood. The laws which prohibit adult consensual behavior are enforced almost solely against gay people. In recent testimony in Sacramento, before the Criminal Procedures Committee of the legislature debating Assemblyman Brown's consensual sex bill, law enforcement officials from Los Angeles admitted that these laws were enforced only against gay people. They do not send undercover agents into bars frequented by heterosexuals in order to entice people into making solicitations. It would be too costly. Yet through some logic known only to themselves, it is not too costly to use these same undercover agents in gay bars and businesses to effect arrests on charges that, if they were uniformly enforced, there would not be jails large enough to hold us all. The kinds of harassment, enticement, entrapment, brutality, discrimination, and injustice perpetrated against gay people are a shame to the concept of justice in this country. On April the 27th, 1953, President Eisenhower signed Executive Order 10450, which effectively denies employment to gay people in the federal government. Many believe that the order applies only to jobs in sensitive areas. The truth is that a gay person may not push a broom down the hall of the Smithsonian Institute or hang a picture on the wall of the National Gallery. It is ironic, in view of its valiant efforts to eradicate prejudice, discrimination, and abuse in matters of race, creed, and color, that the government has itself become a major source and an active promoter of the prejudice, discrimination, and abuse our society directs against gay women and men. It should be of interest to all citizens to realize that the Civil Service Commission launches thorough investigations of every job applicant's private sex life. These investigations, conducted at a cost of some $12 million a year, do not stop at examinations of arrest records. Persons have been followed, their neighbors and fellow employees interrogated, and their mail intercepted. It should be emphatically made clear that these investigations are never related to one's competence, but only to one's sexual preference. In no area of federal employment are these investigations carried out in a more brutal and ruthless manner than in the armed forces. Fortunately for all of us, gay people are no longer willing to accept such patently foolish and immoral prejudice. We are citizens, and we too are entitled to work in the federal system to the limit of our capabilities. To this end, we urge the Democratic Party to enact this gay rights plank, but regardless of whether this convention passes this plank or not, to our millions of gay brothers and sisters, as well as to the Democratic Party, we say, we are here, we will not be still, we will not go away until the ultimate goal of gay liberation is realized, that goal being that all people can live in the peace, the freedom, and the dignity of what they are. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt the speakers. However, we have two points. We have a point of order that we have to recognize. There's a point of order been raised by Rhode Island that in the previous roll call, we should not have allowed the changes of votes. I have to answer that point of order by referring to the rules that says a delegate may change.
That's not going to make any difference in the vote anyway. That's a procedural point. The last speaker is James Foster, 32-year-old community organizer from San Francisco, speaking for the Gay Liberation Minority Platform for Equal Rights for Homosexuals. There will be another speaker in just a moment. The CBS News coverage of tonight's session of the Democratic Convention will continue after this pause for station identification.
This is CBS. CBS News coverage of Campaign 72, the election year. The Democratic National Convention. This morning, the platform debate. Reporting from CBS News Convention headquarters in Miami Beach, here is correspondent Walter Cronkite.
They're arguing the gay liberation minority plank that they want to write into the platform of the party. They just turned down a motion to adjourn. The speaker who just started is Madeline Davis, a 32-year-old communications worker from Buffalo, New York, who's just identified herself as a lesbian. Let's listen.
Opportunity to speak to you. 20 million Americans are grateful and proud of the Democratic Party. We are the minority of minorities. We belong to every race and creed, both sexes, every economic and social level, every nationality and religion. We live in large cities and in small towns, but we are the untouchables in American society. We have suffered the gamut of oppression from being totally ignored or ridiculed to having our heads smashed and our blood spilled in the streets. Now we are coming out of our closets and onto the convention floor to tell you, the delegates, and to tell all gay people throughout America that we are here to put an end to our fears. Our fears that people will know us for who we are, that they will shun and revile us, fire us from our jobs, reject us from our families, evict us from our homes, beat us and jail us. And for what? Because we have chosen to love each other. I am asking that you vote yes for the inclusion of this minority report into the Democratic platform for two major reasons. First, we must speak to the basic civil rights of all human beings. It is inherent in the American tradition that the private lives and lifestyles of citizens should be both allowed and ensured, so long as they do not infringe upon the rights of others. A government that interferes with the private lives of its people is a government that is alien to the American tradition and the American dream. You have before you a chance to reaffirm that tradition and that dream. As a matter of practicality, you also have the opportunity to gain the votes of 20 million Americans that will help in November to put a Democrat in the White House. And secondly, I say to you, I am someone's neighbor, someone's sister, someone's daughter. A vote for this plank is a vote not only for me, but it is a vote for all homosexual women and men across the country to peaceably live their own lives. I wish to remind you that a vote for this plank may now or someday be a vote for your neighbor, your sister, or your brother, your daughter, or your son. We ask for your vote, and we ask because our people have suffered long and hard that you reaffirm for every human being the right to love.
Dan Shore, how does that secret report you got hold of how McGovern delegates were supposed to vote on these things show on this homosexual issue?
Well, let me tell you, even while the person who's going to speak for the McGovern position is getting up to say it, this is the paper that we referred to before, the instructions to McGovern delegates distributed by McGovern aides. It says the majority plank already contains language on this issue. That's not exactly true. The majority plank does say something about maximum freedom to conduct your own lifestyle. There is no reference to homosexuality in it. Goes on, the sense of the platform committee was that the minority plank would be subject to distortion and would be harmful in the general election. It will be opposed by Kathy Welch, a McGovern delegate from Ohio, who is just now getting up to make that speech. Position. Every one of these things ends with position. Against. Although those who feel strongly in behalf of the minority plank should feel free to vote accordingly, which means that unless there is some further hanky-panky by Wallace and or Humphrey delegates wanting to have it passed in order to embarrass Senator McGovern, that this, like the last one, should be defeated.
Thank you, Dan. Clyde Choate, the chairman of the Illinois delegation, is asking to change the roll call vote on the last plank, that abortion plank. They haven't gotten around to voting, of course, yet on the matter that's before the House right now, which is the gay liberation plank for equal employment rights and so forth for homosexuals. We've heard from two admitted homosexuals, a man and a woman, in favor of that plank, and we'll now hear the debate opposed to the plank, opposed to writing it into a national party platform. Certainly, if it is, it'll be the first time in history. But, of course, that's what platforms are for. They move parties ahead. Way back in 1948, Henry Wallace, came in with a lot of a platform for his independent progressive party after he bolted the Democrats, and it was considered a way out radical platform, but most of the things that it was for have been adopted in our national life since then. So as far out as this homosexual plank may appear to some tonight, serious as a matter it is to quite obviously others, it may be a portent of things to come. Kathy Welch, 21-year-old vice chairman of the platform committee from Findlay, Ohio, speaking against the minority report.
This minority report deals with the question of sexual orientation. Before analyzing the report in greater depth, I would like to point out that the Democratic platform has not neglected the problem of a person's right to be different. On page 4, section 3 of the platform committee, it states, and I quote, "Americans should be free to make their own choice of lifestyles and private habits without being subject to discrimination or prosecution." We believe official policy can encourage diversity while continuing to place full emphasis on equal opportunity and integration. We submit that this portion of the 1972 Democratic platform fully addresses itself to the question raised by this minority report. Now let us turn to the minority report and analyze precisely what course of action it would urge this party to take. The minority report states that the new Democratic administration will, and I quote, "urge repeal of all laws, federal and state, regarding voluntary sex acts involving consenting persons in private, laws regulating attire and laws used as a shield for police harassment, seek release of all persons incarcerated in prisons and mental institutions for victimless sex acts." Now, just what would this minority report commit our party to do? First, it would commit the Democratic Party to seek repeal of all laws involving the protection of children from sexual approaches by adults. There is nothing in the minority report which draws a distinction between sexual acts between adults and those between adults and children. However unwise laws involving an adult's personal lifestyle may be, many of these laws which seek to protect children from sexual approaches by adults are important and should not be discarded. Thank you. I do not think that this party wants to commit itself repealing all such laws which are designed to protect the young and the innocent, those who are not in a position to realize the consequence of their acts. The minority report would also bind this party to seek the repeal of all laws related to prostitution, pandering, and pimping. Surely these are questions more appropriate for the states to decide than for the federal government or a national party. The platform committee does not believe that it is appropriate for this party to bind its nominee to a position which would force him to urge all of the states of this great union to repeal all laws related to prostitution, pimping, and pandering. Third, this minority report would commit the party to the repeal of the Mann Act, which was enacted to prevent the transportation of women across state lines for the purpose of white slavery. That law has generally been credited with inhibiting the development of organized prostitution in this country. It would certainly be one of the most ill-considered acts of any political party of any convention to commit itself to repeal a law which has inhibited the development of white slavery in a country. We would earn the ridicule of this nation if we adopted such a suggestion. In short, Minority Report number 8 is unnecessary and ill-considered. It is unnecessary because the platform already addresses itself to the questions involved in the Minority Report. It is ill-considered because it would commit this party to repeal many laws designed to protect the young, the innocent, and the weak. It would be a political disaster of monumental proportions for this party to adopt such a report, and I urge that the convention reject it summarily. Thank you.
Is there another speaker?
Yeah, I got it. You gotta wait.
We've heard the statements in support and opposition to Minority Report number 8.
On this.
The question is, should Minority Report number 8 be adopted? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The noes have it. Minority Report number 8 is not adopted.
That was the report to end discrimination against homosexuals. It was turned down, will not be written into the platform. They will be moving now onto a platform minority plank that would give federal lands not otherwise used to American Indians. Bob Schieffer is down on the convention floor with poet Allen Ginsberg. Bob, are you still there?
Walter, we are still here, and perhaps you didn't see it at first because Mr. Ginsberg has moved into a meditating position as we were awaiting the vote. Mr. Ginsberg, the resolution was just turned down. How do you feel about that?
Maybe in 4 years, the American public will likely be ready to say, and sigh a sigh of relief, and allow a similar platform in the next presidentiad.
Now, you say that maybe they'll say what?
In 4 years, they may say, and allow a homosexual rights platform in the next presidentiad. Remember, the great poet teacher in America, Walt Whitman, was fired from his job in the Customs House because of the homosexual tinge to the text of his book Leaves of Grass, the Calamus section. Such laws still exist on the books so that Walt Whitman would still be fired. So the thing to do is get rid of such laws.
While we were waiting for this vote here, you said several times. What's that all about?
Yes, since I've been here in Miami at the convention out in Flamingo Park with the yippies and the SCLC folk, in order to relieve anxiety, to calm down situations, I've been using the mantra, a body sound, as 4 years ago, was the sound. Now, opening space, accepting the defeat of the homosexual minority plank, for McGovern's peacefulness, that Nixon retire from office quietly, that the war in Vietnam be over, that America relax.
Okay, Walter, I don't know what I could add to that. Do you have any questions?
Say,
Yes, I was going to say... Are you going to say Bob Schieffer for your work down there on the floor?
Okay. Walter Cronkite said,
That's a rather pleasant sound. It's not bad at all. Very relaxing.
At the next convention.
I've said it many times, but usually when I'm trying to think of something else to say. They're working on the Indian lands minority plank now. Leon Cook, a McGovern supporter from Minneapolis, is speaking. A very handsome, I would gather, an Indian himself. He appears to be.
A reformed sense of humanity,
might take a look at him.
morality, and justice toward our Native American community. Our minority plank would seem to be only a small gesture in this direction, and we require and request your strong support so that we too may believe and the Constitution of this great country in the pursuit of our own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
It's a very simple plank. It's the shortest, I'm sure, of any that's been offered. It simply says that surplus federal land should be allocated to American Indians on a first priority basis. There are quite a few American Indians who are on these delegations this year.
Good morning.
Here is another
Shirley
spokesman.
Daly. I'm a nominee Indian and a delegate.
She is from Neopit, Wisconsin.
To this convention from Wisconsin. I'm pleased. I should mention also that I'm a delegate pledged to Senator McGovern.
This minority
I'm
plank
pleased to
is
be
likely
here
to
this
pass.
morning to speak in support of Minority Report number 9, in addition to the rights.
I'm curious to know, Dan Shore, are you around? I'm just curious to know if the McGovern people have taken a position on this one. You may have reported to us earlier, but I didn't. I don't recall what the answer was. Well, I'll get Dan Shore on there in just a moment. I think he's off chasing a story at the moment. Trying to get a little. Apparently, somebody in New Jersey is trying to get the attention of the floor. They've got a lot of other ways to do that.
Delegations are saying they cannot hear, they cannot see.
Charles Osgood's right down there in the New Jersey delegation. Charles, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Walter.
What's going on down there?
I have Jim Boughton with me, who is the vice chairman of the delegation. Jim, will you explain what is it that New Jersey is trying to do here?
There are delegates in New Jersey who would like to object to the language used with the last person who argued in favor of the minority report. They object to the language that she used. Right.
You object to the language that was used in the last
speaker. There's objection to that. She's going to explain it right now.
They're speaking of the last speaker on the homosexual plank. Is that it?
That's right, Walter. They're trying to get the.
However, we've noted that you have found something that was said distasteful.
Chair is speaking now to the New Jersey delegation, which has found something distasteful. And the New Jersey delegation will be perhaps given the opportunity, or will you not be given the opportunity?
We're not going to be given the opportunity.
We're on another subject.
Was this explained to you on the telephone when you spoke with the chair?
We were told on the telephone that there is nothing in the rules that permits a point of personal privilege or a way of responding to something that was said from the podium, which we think was full of falsehood, was very misleading, and which casts a great deal of aspersion upon this delegation.
Was it just one thing that somebody said?
The thing was that although I personally did not vote for that plank, and I do not think that plank should be on our platform, the things that were stated connecting any kind of sexual difference with the whole question of molesting of children is just completely wrong. It has absolutely nothing to do with the question, and it left a terrible, we had a very strong reaction to having this kind of false representation made by someone who is responsible for reflecting the negative point of view. I could make a very good argument for not having this plank in our platform, but I would not stoop to presenting this kind of falsehood to the American public. And I felt that we should have had an opportunity to correct this, and we can't do it because of the rules of the delegation, or rules of the convention.
But the convention
we'll
is
have
now.
to do it another way.
The convention has now moved on to other
Convention
business.
has now moved on to other business, right?
Walter,
That was a statement by Miss Kathy Welch of Michigan, who said that, who, as you heard there, did say that the plank for homosexual freedom should be turned down because it would violate some laws that protected children from molestation, and that's what they're objecting to. And now I've heard from Dan Shore. He says the McGovern instruction on the Indian lands minority plank is vote your conscience, taking no position on it. Shirley Daly of Neopit, Wisconsin, is speaking, Menominee Indian.
I ask you to support this addition to the Rights of American Indians platform. This
This
will
is
be
likely
a
to
tremendous
pass.
boost
Really
to the
can't do
rights
very much
and
harm, this
morale
bill,
of
and it
all
could do some
American
good.
Indians. When the Menominee tribe was terminated in 1961, we had nearly $10 million in the U.S. Treasury. In addition, we had unspoiled lakes, streams, and rivers and forests within our boundaries. We were once considered to be one of the richest tribes in the country. Today, we're one of the poorest, and we have lost much of our best lands due to termination. President Nixon has rejected the termination policy. In your support on the platform on the rights of American Indians, you have joined him in opposing this genocidal policy of wresting from the Native American from his land and identity. But words are meaningless without action. Indians have had enough tokenism and lip service. We are no longer satisfied making honorary chiefs of every politician that wants to boost his political image. We call on you, the party of the people, to right the wrongs that termination has already wreaked upon Native peoples. We want you, the delegates to the 1972 Democratic National Convention, to vote yes and help to restore to the Native people some of the land that was taken away from him, usually against his wishes. With your yes vote on this matter, you will help to restore hope and self-determination to all American Indians, especially those whose lives and land have been dealt a backward step by a genocidal termination policy. I thank you for listening to me.
Bill Small, who is up at the platform for us, says that they're estimating up there 2 more hours for this session. George Herman, who is covering this for CBS Radio, has requested that I adjourn the session. And I can tell George Herman that I'm not about to do that because, you see, John Hart frequently has sat in for me for the CBS Evening News, and in 2 more hours I'm going to run right into John Hart's morning news time and take over for him. So I'm not going to adjourn for a minute. The Indian Lands bill is going to have an opposition speaker. Here he is. He's Ed LeBlanc. He's a 22-year-old student from Abbeville, Louisiana. And let's hear the argument against this bill.
Which calls upon this party to allocate all federal surplus lands to American Indians on a first priority basis. There is no question, Mr. Chairman, that the American Indian is due much more from this nation than he has received. Educational and health opportunities, jobs, justice, and land. But this amendment is not the way to do it. First, we simply don't know what the amendment means. The proponent of this amendment, before the platform committee, did not know what the amendment meant when he introduced it. It was introduced as an accommodation, and the members of the platform committee did not know what it meant, which is largely why it was defeated and is now a minority report. For instance, what does the word allocate mean? Are we voting to give away federal surplus lands or to sell them on a preferred basis? The difference is very germane to the matter at hand. What federal surplus lands are we asked to allocate to the American Indians? This amendment refers indiscriminately to all federal surplus lands, but surely there is a difference between surplus lands adjacent to or near existing reservations and surplus lands in the middle of an urban area. For example, if the United States government closed the Brooklyn Navy Yard, or the Abbeville Post Office, or the Thibodeau Drought Control Board, and declared it surplus property, would it automatically be turned over to the American Indians? If so, What tribe or tribes? The report's vagueness in this area is intolerable to all involved. Second, disposing of land is a serious matter. In each case, the competing needs and claims must be considered. However great our sympathies for American Indians, they are not the only legitimate claimants for surplus lands. I submit that it would be irresponsible to adopt a minority report that disposed of all federal surplus lands in a particular way without consideration of circumstance in each case. Mr. Chairman, I humbly urge the defeat of Minority Report number 9.
This concludes the statement in support and in opposition to Minority Report number 9. The question is, should Minority Report number 9 be adopted? All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it.
That's the first of the minority reports that's been approved here tonight, and it's the shortest of the group. It simply provides that surplus federal lands should be given to American Indians on a first priority basis. The question was raised, of course, about what that specifically means. Is it a post office that is declared surplus to be given to the Indians? And if so, to what tribe? A pretty good point. But of course, in a platform, this just specifies in a platform a basic policy decision and isn't the legislation that is going into the law of the land. Obviously, there's some happy Indian delegates and a lot of happy other delegates down there tonight over that particular approval. You might report at this point, they're about to take up the next minority report, which is a Black Caucus-sponsored minority report on housing, providing for rent subsidies and for repair, mandatory repair of substandard housing, if no repair, confiscation of that housing, supported by the Black Caucus. Jesse Jackson of Illinois is going to speak for it. We might report just before that, as Kenneth Gibson, the mayor of Newark, gets the meeting back to order. With George McGovern's nomination assured, George Wallace's dramatic appearance here in the campaign hall in this long, drawn-out platform debate, we haven't been paying very much attention to the delegate strength of the candidates. An interesting thing has occurred. Senator Henry Jackson, probably the furthest to the right of any of the candidates, with the help of the AFL-CIO, seems to be benefiting most from the withdrawal of Humphrey Muskie, as much as McGovern at any rate. Before they bowed out, CBS News estimates had Jackson with 107 probable first ballot votes. Now his estimate is around 341, our CBS News estimate. He's expected to get a considerable number of the 407 that we list as not determined at this time. That would put him around the 700 mark, and that's what he's been estimating tonight. Of course, that's all academic, really, since McGovern has jumped on our figures by 262 to a total of 1,765. Plenty of pad there for a nomination which requires only 1,509. Here's Jesse Jackson speaking for this housing amendment, or housing minority plank. Let's listen to him. He's the black leader, former aide to Martin Luther King from Chicago. His delegation unseated Mayor Daley, as you know.
Have seats in this convention. I rise to support the Poor People's Platform, Dr. George Weiler of NWRO, Dr. Ralph Abernathy of SCLC, and Brother Jesse Gray of the Tenants Organization. And I challenge this convention to listen to what is happening even at